It's 1 o'clock. I know Adele said she would be here also, but we could get started. Oh, there's Arlen.
Oh, good.
Morgan was saying, I was chatting with Morgan earlier today, and I was telling her how difficult this book was. Very interesting quality book, but very difficult, especially now. And she said that she felt that people like to read the lightweight, you know, fluffy books on their own, and then they really like to go to book groups to discuss things like this, that to hear what other people think, rather than reading them on their own. And I think she's very right about that.
I think she is right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, for one thing, on the fluffy books, there's really not that much to say, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes. So, right.
But, you know, but I was hoping, you know, people would come today because this was not an easy book. And I remember putting what was it, Antipoldi or something on the list, and we didn't, that one didn't pass the
I read
muster.
that. It was a mystery, and I read it. It was, you know, it was like something you'd see on BritBox on a television show. Or
Yeah.
I saw they have a new one out, a new Antipoldi. Now there's two.
So it's worth reading when you want to read something.
Something fun, you know. She's an older woman, so we can relate.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Here's Arlen.
There's Arlen, and Linda's there, but
On the phone.
not there to see. So I guess we could get started. I know Adele told me repeatedly she'd be here, and she often comes a little late. I wanted to just quickly run over a few things that we have going on in the near future. And everyone knows how to get onto these programs through the calendar, right?
Right.
Because I have sent out emails, but I assume people just know how to join us. Oh, 2 more people. There we go.
Oh, there's Kathy. Okay.
Hi. How's your mom?
Hi.
Hi, Kathy.
How are you?
Good.
And, I think Arlen's trying to come in again. I don't know if she's having technical problems.
So Arlen, you're here, right?
I see Arlen.
I see Arlen too, but I don't think she.
Oh, but she's not moving.
Still.
She's not moving. That's not good.
No, she logged out and now I admitted her again, and she said it says she's joining, but maybe she's frozen or something. I don't quite know.
I didn't realize that she wasn't moving. That's not good.
Here's Adele. Yeah, I hope she can make it in.
There you are.
Hi, Adele.
You made it.
Well, let me quickly mention that a few things are coming up. I don't know if any of you, some of you do come to the John Harris history book discussions.
Yeah.
And his next one is Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. It will be on Thursday, what day is that? The 12th, I think, at 2 p.m. And that should be interesting. He always leads an interesting discussion. Brian Stevenson's pretty impressive. Also, I put the TED Talk video up on the library calendar if anyone wants to watch it. Then we have a couple of book talks coming up. And one is a local author named J.P. Jordan, who lives up north, somewhere near Ellison Bay. And he's written a book called Men of God, which is a thriller. And he will be doing a book talk Wednesday, the 18th. So if you want to hear about his background and the book he's written, you can join us. And we do have the book in the system, but not a lot of copies. Oops, here's Trissa. Arlen's still trying to get in. Oh, there? Are you?
I think Arlen moved, but she's not moving.
I see her in 2 places. That's the trouble. I wonder if I should log that one out. I'll remove the one that's not moving and hope she can get in.
See what happens.
Let's hope she gets back in. Oh, I think she's using a different device, maybe.
Aha.
There she is.
There she is again. So after the Men of God, this book talk, we have next month being Mrs. Lewis will be our next month's book. I hope everyone gets a chance to get a hold of that book about C.S. Lewis's and his wife. And I think that's our one nonfiction. Then outside of book discussions, we should have a really interesting talk by Kevin Quinn in December on the Sturgeon Bay or Door County being part of the Ice Age Trail. There was a little story about it on Door County Daily News, and
Yeah.
Quinn will be doing a program here. Dan Powers is another local author who's written a book. It's somewhat involving his genealogy research, but it's fiction, and he will be here in December on the 9th to talk about his book. It's called How Long the Shadow. So lots of things to look forward to. Is Arlen in now? Okay.
Yeah. Carolyn, you hear us?
Yeah. Okay, good. So this book, There. I just want to say that when I made the list, I tried to add some fluffy, light things since this is such a difficult time. But you guys voted on this book, which is very well written and it won a lot of awards. So even though it's a difficult time, it turned out that it was very appropriate because November is Native American Heritage Month, and also known as American Indian and Alaska Native Heritage Month. So it's kind of appropriate that we read this now. And it certainly is a book that after that first chapter, it really sets us straight on the history that we thought we knew, or maybe thought it was a myth that we had been given our whole lives. I don't know, but I'm glad so many of you came to discuss it, and I hope you have some opinions. I found it kind of tricky to keep the characters straight. Tommy Orange himself he says when he was young, he was not much of a reader, but he studied sound engineering, couldn't get his job. He worked for a while in the Native American Health Center. And I think a lot of the stories come from that experience. Plus he got a job in a bookstore, and then he became a voracious reader. And that's when he started writing. I think he's working on another book right now, a sequel to this. So what did everyone think?
Wonderful. I read it twice and I have to read it a third time because it's so complex that you can't remember all, like you said, there's so many characters, you can't remember everything the first time you read it. And so I read it again, and now I want to read it. I want to get it and read it the third time.
Yeah.
I thought it was wonderful. Yeah.
Depressing. I mean,
I'm glad he had that character list in the front.
Yes.
Glad he had the character list.
Yeah.
Found it extremely enlightening, depressing, and tedious.
Tedious.
Oh, tedious.
I don't know
Yeah,
about
I'm not an enthusiastic fan of it.
Hmm.
I understand why you got all these awards. I mean, I'm here to listen. I'm here to be enlightened.
Well, good. That often works.
Yeah, it does. And so please help me.
Well, it kind of reminded me right away of Olive Kitteridge, in that it seemed like a string of short stories.
Yes.
And I like the structure. I like the way he starts with a bang and then has all of these different characters and weaves them together in some ways and then has them all. I did not like the ending from just an emotional standpoint, but I thought it was a very interesting structure and a metaphor for what is going on, what has happened to this culture over history. So what did everyone else think about the structure of the book?
Well, again, it was hard to keep track of it, but again, it reminded me more of Faulkner, where there's so many stories going on at one time. But I thought it was well worthwhile because it's a stunning story. It's just stunning the way what has happened to the Indians and what they're having to go to the cities to survive, and how they don't fit in and how they try to fit in and try to keep their culture going. Yeah, in a modern day Western.
Yeah.
You're here.
Has anybody else read,
It's urban, not so much the old-fashioned Western. What were you
Yes,
saying, Jean?
yes, yes.
Jean?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, there was an inevitability. He was building to that you just knew bad things were gonna happen, and you just wondered how bad is it going to be? And it
Mhm.
was very bad. But this, I thought the structure was good. I liked the structure.
I like the structure too. I think it was very challenging, especially at first, to figure out like who these people were. I kept going back to the diagram and trying to figure out how they kind of interrelated to one another. But this is like, for me, a whole different world. These characters are people, you know, this urban Indian experience is not something that at least I'm familiar with. And I thought it was very helpful to kind of go into each of these worlds and the complexity of it and their individual struggles. And you know, I think that for me, that it helps kind of help build a story, because it is such a, you know, a difficult story, but it also, everybody, it's going to be coming from very different angles too. And so for me, it kind of helped me once we started going, especially in the second half, when everybody started to merge. I think it kind of, for me, came together a little better. But I thought the stories were really riveting and fascinating. The kind of this whole circle of you know, challenges that these folks have because of what's happened in the past, that it just seems to, you know, keep going back and back, you know, round and round, in terms of making it difficult for them to kind of, you know, to live full lives now.
I was going to say that I was trying to figure out the author's purpose, because at one point I couldn't figure out, okay, educating us to the situation of the people and what they have to live with. But I was trying to figure out if the author was trying to get us to feel sorry for these people, or it was kind of hard, besides educating us just to the basic what they are like. Because actually you could take almost any culture and take the people and find the interrelationships where people have struggled, you know, the people who are on the bottom of the group. And so, yes, I was trying to figure that out from the author's purpose of writing it. Yeah.
Maybe that was one of his purposes, to show you that it didn't have to be the Native American culture. It could be any culture.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the
Go ahead.
characters were confused with Hispanics at various points. Several of them mentioned that
Yeah,
they went through school and their classmates thought they were of Hispanic origin.
Mhm.
And they didn't always disabuse the people of that opinion, because maybe being Hispanic is one step above being Native American.
Yeah,
And
and Tommy Orange himself in an interview said he's been mistaken for being Hispanic. He's half Native American, half white, and he's been confused with Hispanics and Asians also.
Mm.
A lot of people have actually, again, they look down on him because of the different, it seems like different ethnic groups besides white, Caucasian, even though he's half.
I had an enormous problem keeping the characters separate. And my book I read did not have this cast of characters at the beginning and the relationship. I'd like to read it again, and I'd like to have that in front of me, because it saved an awful lot of
Yay.
time. I finally had to start over making one for myself.
Yeah, that's what I did. And then the sad commentary on the end of the book, when I got to the end of the book, I actually went back and said, okay, who at the end of the book is still alive and who isn't? That's a sad commentary. Anyway. Yes.
Someone has some echoing going
And
on
on
here.
the other hand, when we're talking about, okay, different ethnic groups, so the one elderly Native American that was teaching the others how to do the drumming and the dancing, but especially the drumming. And he talked about how that music and that drumming was so much a part of who he was and how it brought him out. And really, when you think about it, there's many ethnic groups that have that music as the way they feel themselves, the way they identify themselves. I thought that part was kind of neat, to the drumming and that part of their heritage. Yes.
The drumming seemed to come up a lot. It really is powerful too when you think about it. I mean, there are these drum groups in the area for, I don't know, what's the word, not meditation, but some sort of therapy. So drumming is really important, and you can see how that's attractive in that culture.
And the music that has that as its heavy beat and repeated beat is part of their music, whether it be rap music or Haitian music, or, you know, that same idea. Yes.
Well, drums are pretty basic to every culture, and they're pretty earthly. They're pretty basic.
Mhm.
What character did you,
Heartbeat.
does any character stand out to you? You don't necessarily have to remember the name, but but whatever story, what stands out to you as being really, especially, well, I liked Edwin. He seemed to have so many problems, but he seemed like a nice kid.
And the mother is the Karen and the father's Harvey, but that's also,
Yeah.
what was, you know, that kind of relationship. Yes. I liked the idea of being the one who was making the movie, who was going around and getting the video clips of different people.
Sweetheart. Sweetheart. Bob, you want me to move? I'll move. Whoops, we just got Billie Holiday here. Sorry. Which
Okay.
could tie in, but all right.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I was gonna ask people if they read The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich, because I just happened to read that maybe a month ago. And that's also about Native American culture, but a different setting. Not, well, it combined an urban setting and the reservation setting. And it was, it had a bit more positivity in it, but also very interesting. So.
Yes, I have read it. I've been working my way through Louise Erdrich one by one. And that was the most recent one that I read, and I liked it very, very much.
You're talking about Night Watchman?
The Night Watchman.
Yes.
I know. Jane and I read it. Yeah.
Yes.
I told Jane that we should do a book club trip to her bookstore in Minnesota someday.
Oh, that would be neat.
What is the other
I
one?
think it-
Was it Round Table? Is that the other one she wrote? A Roundhouse? What was the other one she wrote? One of her earlier ones that I enjoyed.
Think- Maybe.
And I was kind of timed out for a while, and I don't know if anybody mentioned this, but you know, in Night Watchman, the Night Watchman was kind of involved in the government of the Indian tribe, and the United States wanted them to undergo emancipation, and I thought that was such an interesting word. And of course, he was fighting the emancipation because what that meant is just letting them go.
Right.
And where they would end up would be the Indian tribe that Louise Erdrich was writing about. They ended up in Minneapolis or St. Paul. And of course, this crew went out to, we're in Oakland, but they did not have a good life.
We lived in Arizona for 5 years on the edge of the Navajo reservation. And I worked at the high school in Holbrook, Arizona, where about half of our population was Navajo. And I found this book interesting because it deals with urban Native Americans versus the Navajo pretty much lived on the reservation. It's very rural. And I don't know, it had a lot to say, but I found it kind of, but they had a lot of the same problems too. I mean, They're not that much different really, except for the setting. And the kids at the high school, a lot of them would stay they had dorms. This is a very small town, about 6,000, but they had dorms for the kids on the reservation because it was so far to go to their homes. Rather than taking them back and forth every day, they would stay at the dorms during the week and then go home on the weekends. They're run by the BIA. And, but a lot of the kids, I just remember one morning in particular, when we had a staff meeting and the principal came in and said, several of the boys were in the hospital in Gallup, New Mexico, because the dorm leader could not wake them up because they had been drinking so much that he couldn't wake them up, and they had to rush to the hospital. And our principal was practically crying. And he was married to a Navajo woman. She was a counselor at our school. But it's a lot of the same problems that you find in this book, even though they were very rural rather than Oakland. I don't know a whole lot about Oakland. The other thing I found interesting about this book is a very short part of it, where the filmmaker is interviewing to get the grant for his job. And there's a white guy there who is talking about the cheap rent in part of Oakland and kind of the gentrification of Oakland. And this guy kind of seems to resent it because he's lived there all his life, and it's a place where Indians live, and someone's coming in and you know, it's gonna raise the rent, it's gonna change the whole place, which has happened to a lot of places, but in this case, it's a Native American talking about it. It was just kind of ironic, I guess, but I don't know how to describe it, but that kind of stuff with me. That little bit in there, but and then some of the stories, like Edwin's story that he made up toward the end about him having a big house that he inherited, and then was it Edwin that did it? He was the writer, right? And then all of a sudden someone asked to stay there, and he said sure, and then he brought all his friends, and pretty soon he was left with a closet under the stairs.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
There was one other story too that it's about being on a yacht, and people outside the yacht were kind of drowning, but the people on the yacht said, well, why don't they do something to save themselves, kind of thing. But here they are on this yacht, and it's I mean, it kind of tells you how things are, kind of awakens you to what things are really like out there.
And how about the spider legs and
The spider
Oh, that was,
So I was gonna
Does
mention.
anybody
that
have
was the oddest
insight
thing.
on the spider legs? Does anybody have any insight on those spider legs?
well, in an
No.
interview, Tommy Orange said that actually happened to him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said he knew he had to use it in the book. So,
Well, the analogy, what they're saying about a spider web being a trap as well as a home. I mean, are they trapped in Oakland? It's their home, but they're also trapped there by everything. You know, it's kind of a metaphor.
yeah,
Maybe, I don't know.
I thought the spider legs were magical realism.
yeah, I thought so too.
I've never heard of
Did
it.
you?
Well, when you're dealing with a culture like that too, there's mythology and all sorts of things, implications there.
Yeah.
Right. I was
That
wondering
was
about the
fun.
family structure and the sort of, you know, how everything seems so chaotic in a way. You know, everyone's taking care of other people's children and
But that is the way it is on the reservation, even. too.
Yeah, I think.
They live with, it's a clan, you know, it's a, you
the
know,
clan
clan,
situation.
and they take care of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I was wondering, you know, like, you probably all remember Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, and the way that he had one line in there where he said the loss of the rites of passage in the ceremonies of the group were really a great loss because the kids didn't know how to behave or how to grow up. Do you think that's all part of it, that the community's so almost destroyed in a way because of the way they're forced to live in these cities? And
They're untethered. They're just sort of, they don't have the connection, you know, to their past, to the, you know, I think, and that's probably like we were saying earlier, true of other cultures too, that, if you don't have that sense of culture, it kind of helps frame kind of who you are. And so, and especially like in an urban setting where you've got, the drugs and the violence and everything, it's easy to see them spiral out of control.
And that's where the powwow came in, because that was their culture. So I guess you could say figuratively, if these killings took place at the powwow, they're killing that culture. They're destroying. Yeah.
It's irony.
Figuratively, yeah, the irony of it. I had a question about the title, and that kind of fits in too. There isn't there anymore, and you can say that about a lot of things in our society in general. Like people talk about the family bonding, many things that used to be there but aren't there anymore, and I think that's part of it too. Like you said, the culture, the tribe, how you fit in wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, and also this powwow thing is intertribal. I mean, it's a bunch of different tribes, and a lot of these people didn't necessarily know their heritage. Some of those kids didn't know their fathers or whatever, but they're all seeking to know more about the culture, like learning on YouTube.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. The character, I think, was Orville, who finds the costume, and and so he starts watching videos and learning how to do. He doesn't fully get it. It's not like he's been taught by somebody in the tribe. He's just kind of imitating a YouTube video.
Yeah.
But that helps make him feel kind of connected to us.
Yeah, I wondered about how authentic that would have been, though. Was he really learning the real culture, or was he learning YouTube culture, which may or may not?
What was the guy's name? The one who was in charge, the older gentleman, Thomas Frank, who was the custodian at the Indian Center. He was the one who was teaching everybody the drumming. Yeah, that heritage. I don't know about the rest of you, but what this brought memories for me, when I grew up, growing up in Chicago, we would go on the 4th of July up to, I don't think we came as far north as Tomahawk, Wisconsin, but it was someplace in Wisconsin to see a powwow. We would do that every year. And I remember there was fireworks, because I didn't like fireworks as a kid. So that really brought back some memories for me, is going to see the powwow. Yeah, I don't know why we did, but we did. Maybe it was a Chicago thing.
I'm remembering going to Girl Scout camp, and we did something like a powwow, white man's version, of course. So I have a very distorted 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old remembrance of a powwow, which is probably totally out in left field.
And in Holbrook, when we lived in Arizona, they would have, not powwows, but they'd have Indian dancing on one night a week in the summertime for the tourists, basically.
Yeah,
you wonder how authentic that, were they just trying to raise money for the town? Was it authentic? Did the people really want to be there? You just kind of wonder, and I don't know, I don't know the reason.
I think that kind of thing depends upon where it's being done. If you go to the Heard Museum in Phoenix, Arizona, anything that's done there is real.
Yeah, that's authentic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally authentic. And that brings me to, if you're watching a video or a YouTube video that's from the Heard Museum, it's totally authentic. And if it's kind of pathetic that that's the only way you have to learn your culture, that you have to, but yet it's adaptable because they're urban Native Americans. I'm just seeing all kinds of things that I missed in this book. Thank you very much.
Good.
What about the fetal
Now,
alcohol syndrome?
Or drinking, alcoholism.
Yeah.
Well, alcohol plays such a role all the way through, and some of them are alcoholics, and then the one kid is a victim of the parents drinking.
And I didn't realize that it actually impacted the way they looked, that it had an impact on their facial features and stuff. And that was a surprise to me.
When I taught in Missoula, Montana, special education, I had 2 brothers, And one had fetal alcohol syndrome with the facial deformities, and the other had what was called fetal alcohol effect, which he looked okay, but emotionally and intellectually, but especially emotionally, he was really, he really had some problems. So yeah.
And think of Russia today.
Yes.
Almost all the children have some degree of fetal alcohol syndrome there that are growing up there today. And all the adopted children that have come over to the US and have had to be either sent back or gone to Russian adoptee boot camp because of this fetal alcohol syndrome. Just think of a country the size of Russia with all the children having that. And that's the case according to what I read.
Yes.
Think of the basic where alcoholism came to Native Americans.
Well, the white people traded the alcohol to the Native Americans so that they could get what they wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, and the whole thing, I don't know if some of you joined us for the discussion of the color of law, about how in the United States, Black people were discriminated against in housing and how that's affected their position. You know, they didn't inherit property and the whole range of things. And this is very much the same thing, where the group was put on reservations and in certain situations. I live in Wisconsin. I grew up in Green Bay, and there's a reservation right there, but those Oneida Indians came from New York. They were sent here from far away, and then they're put on this reservation. And supposedly in Door County, there were Potawatomi and Menominee tribes, and those people are no longer here. So we really have forced people.
Don't get all mixed up in blaming white culture entirely for the Indians that are here. Indians pushed each other around in the beginning.
Sure.
That's how we lost the Potawatomis. And the Oneidas got pushed out, but
Of New York.
from New York, but every group of people doesn't get along with every group of within its own kind of people.
Is it our country that's a little different because we are such a mixing pot compared to other countries where everyone's, it's more homogenic. What is the word? Where like the Scandinavian countries originally, now this is changing with all the refugee situations, but they tend to have a culture that is unified in a country, whereas we're all different things. And does it make it more difficult for us?
And if you go to the Southwest or maybe other areas of the country like Missoula and you see all the Indian reservations and you see how much of their culture is still there. Now they can't, that's why I thought the book was so interesting, because they talked about, the Orville is a pretend Indian, and he can't maintain his culture in the city. And should he? If he doesn't want to, if they don't want to, if they choose to go off the reservation. But if you go to any reservations and you know any people there and you see, like you taught there, and of course when you're on the Navajo Indian reservation, and their cultures are very different, and they are very still there. They live on that Indian reservation. They live their culture. For good, for it's poor. It's there's many differences, and they are not integrated into the United States of America as far as their culture or anything. And it's just amazing. It's like going into another country, I think.
Yeah, and in Arizona, the place we lived in Arizona was the first place. It was minority majority basically, with Hispanics and Navajo. And the rest of us were Anglos, and I don't hear us referred to as Anglos in most parts of the country, but I would be an Anglo. And I remember coming back, because I was born here, so I have brothers and sisters here, and watching videos of a Christmas program for my brother's kids. And I was looking at this video, I thought, everyone looks so white. After being in Arizona for a while and watching my own kids and their programs there, you just get used to, the mix of Navajo and Hispanic all mixed together. And here, everybody looks so white. And
Was the mix an equal mix, Karen? Was the mix an equal mix, Karen?
Oh, it was pretty equal. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know what you mean by
Good to
equal,
know.
but yeah.
Because we purport to be a melting pot, but we're only a melting pot when it serves our advantage.
Yeah.
We're not a melting pot when it serves. There's always somebody on the bottom that's wrong, and we purport to be a melting pot, but I mean, 150 years ago, the Irish were on the bottom. Now that's not a problem. 35 years ago, the Vietnamese immigrants were on the bottom. Now they're higher up in the chain. But earlier in the conversation, it was discussed that Tommy Orange, the author himself, has been mistaken as Asian or Hispanic. And the question was posed, was that better in the pecking order? I mean, for a melting pot, I think we're pretty false. We still have pecking order.
I didn't notice it so much in Arizona, but it was probably there. But
that's great that you didn't. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
You've mentioned 3 different options.
Yeah.
And you said that you didn't feel it. I think that's great. We don't have many options in Door County. We are mostly all one.
The other phrase, and this author used it too, and I forget which context it was, but Indians who are described as apples, red on the outside and white on the inside. And that I had heard in Arizona too. And the same with Oreos, black on the outside, white on the inside, as far as, acting like you were from a different culture. And that's an interesting topic too, all in itself. But
Was that a negative term, an apple?
yeah. Could you weren't being true to yourself, Yeah, it was
Yeah.
considered a negative term. Yeah.
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 Well, I had an idea that bothered me and yet it didn't, and I'll throw it out there. Do you remember in the very beginning, he talked about a test pattern? Remember when we were all young?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Test pattern came up.
That's better.
Oh, yeah.
The thing that struck me, oh my gosh, he's saying it was a target. It was, Indians there were going to shoot at this target. So I did some research. I looked up, and the test patterns were created in 1938. And according to what I read, it was done as the Indian was chosen strictly because they needed an image that had the variances of texture and the colors or the dark black, white, and that they meant it as like the Indian had nickel, or they were talking about how at the time it was just an image that the artist created. So then I got to thinking, is that part of what happens with history, that something was created innocently with no intent of any kind at all, but over time it's handed down differently, it's misinterpreted differently? Okay, that's my thought.
Well, I'll say that you can call it innocent, but there, in the old Door County newspapers around the turn of the century, there are these ads for tobacco that are really repulsive. I don't think they were meant to be repulsive at the time, but by looking at them today, they're comparing the curly tobacco to someone's hair. It's just astounding how bad it is. But do you think at the time they thought it was? They just think it was cute or something? I don't know, but it's extremely bad by today's standards. So
I think the key to that is
I think there's still a brand called Redmond Tobacco, isn't there?
Redman.
this was, yeah.
Redman, yeah.
Well, this tobacco was with an N word,
Oh,
which you don't use today.
Don't use that today. No.
Yeah, and you can find those pretty easily in those old newspapers and big ads, and probably, all these caricatures that were really offensive to us, but at the time, They seemed to think it was fine. So if the Native Americans are offended by the Indian head thing, I guess that's what it comes down to.
Yes, over time, yeah, it has. We've learned that it can be offensive.
And this book talks so much about technology too, with learning, you know, the 3D printer to make the gun on plastic,
Oh,
YouTube
and
video.
the drones.
Starting out with that
drones.
that Indian head thing on a TV kind of combines the classic, you know, figure of an Indian with technology. You know, it's kind of a combination of the two too. I kind of saw that as a connection too.
Hmm.
I'd like to talk about the scene at Alcatraz.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was
okay.
interesting.
That had some historical basis, and I was going to look it up this morning and didn't. But I think there was an effort to occupy the island at one point.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I have some memory of that in the 60s, hearing it on the news. Did anybody look that up or?
Well, I have a little something I copied from some sort of guide. It says Alcatraz Island is a small island in San Francisco Bay. It housed a maximum security federal prison from 1934 to 63 and from 1969 to 71. Almost 100 natives and allies occupied the island. The occupation was meant to demonstrate that the out-of-use federal land was now suitable for native reclamation. The uprising was forcibly ended by the U.S. government. Today, the former prison on the island is a public museum and tourist attraction. So I think they were trying to claim the land.
So there were only 100 who went out there, actually. From this book, I had the impression there may be hundreds and hundreds. And
Okay.
it clearly was not a successful political move by them at all because, well, they were all evicted eventually.
Forcibly, yeah.
Did you say 2 years? Was it 2 years, Laura?
It says 69
Did
to
it go on for
71.
2 years? Is that?
3 years, 2 to 3.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's like there were squatters out there.
Yeah, do you think it was a political statement they were trying to make?
Yeah.
It seems,
I think
I mean,
so.
they were forced on the reservations.
Yeah,
And
but
then they're saying this is land that we could have too.
Well, in the time of the 60s, would it have been like making a commune like we had back then with hippies, quote unquote hippies?
Well, didn't you
don't-
think that's how the parents were? Who, the
Mhm.
Yeah.
mother or whatever? Wasn't she
I-
kind of like a hippie type?
yeah, she ignored her children. She just let the children go do their thing, and then they did, which got them into trouble.
Very well.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like a very well organized protest if that's what it was, nor was it an organized commune, if that's what it was intended to be.
I'm on the Alcatraz website on my phone, and it's the 50th anniversary. It says there's a whole category called the 50th anniversary of the occupation, and the occupation was to what Alcatraz is now saying, and there's an exhibit about it. They're saying it was a watershed moment in the movement for Native American civil rights for 19-month duration.
Hmm.
And it was 50 years ago.
Okay.
Mhm.
There's some footage on YouTube, and yeah, if you look on YouTube, and there's about 4 different documentary footages.
Okay, so I'm just thinking, doing a little bit of time frame. It's 50 years ago, and he wrote this book a couple years ago. Those children who were young teenagers at that point now would be in their 60s. So that figures, those characters were of that era at the powwow.
Mm.
And had not gone too far by white man's standards. They were not really overly successful persons.
But the philosophy behind it was there was the 1868 treaty that allowed Indians to appropriate surplus federal land. So that was the reasoning behind taking it over. And if you remember the characters that were in their the men that occupied,
Yeah.
So then they brought over other people.
It's
5
really
suits
not a
they
very
were shipped.
pleasant place to spend 2 years. I mean, it's this island.
Yeah.
There's not much vegetation.
comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not a place I
Uh-huh.
want to be for a long time. I'm,
Have you been there?
yeah, I've been there. It's now
Yeah.
like a National Historic Site or something like that.
Felt like a
So
prison,
it's
what it was.
interesting to visit.
It's a prison.
Wasn't there a line in the,
Right.
they were expecting some supplies and I was wondering what it was and it turned out to have been alcohol. That was not food or
Oh,
used books or something like that. It was alcohol. It was the supplies that were arriving by boat.
hmm.
Well, apparently this book was the book for one book discussion in Philadelphia this year, which would be interesting.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
called One Book, One Philadelphia. I
Oh,
have some questions from that book here.
Hmm.
How did you think the women were treated?
Yikes.
What's the
Actually,
last?
I thought one of the neatest, or I would say most riveting sections was Blue trying to escape from her abusive husband. I was on the edge of my seat on was she going to get away? That was really moving.
Yeah,
The woman who helped her on the, yeah.
The woman who helped her on the train.
yes.
Or on the bus, yeah.
And she was the daughter of
Mhm.
Jackie, right? Did I forget,
think
was
so.
did she ever understand that that was her mother?
Yeah, Blue
Yeah.
she just found out at the powwow that was her
Wow,
mother.
wow.
That the
Wow.
power recognized her mother.
Or they talked about it because her father was Harvey,
Harvey.
who was also Edwin's Black's father. So it's all so connected. But yes. Or the character, another female character was Opal, the one who went to the post office who was raising the boys.
Yeah.
That was another strong character, actually.
Yeah.
And you know what's so sad is the one kid who learned to code and do 3D printing.
Yes.
And with those skills, he could have gotten a really good job. But instead he made
No,
guns.
he made a gun.
Yeah.
Didn't he do it to get money for his mother though?
I'm looking at my notes.
Was he doing it for himself or?
Was it for his brother or something? Wasn't his
He would-
brother owed money to someone or?
He owed money to the drug dealer, I thought.
And they,
Yeah, I thought it was drugs.
tricked him. They tricked him into thinking he owed, because they tricked him into getting the drugs and they stole the drugs away from him.
Yes, that's right.
Pay for them. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm looking at that.
And the title, someone mentioned the title earlier.
Mhm.
That comes from
Gertrude Stein, wasn't it?
Gertrude Stein,
Gertrude Stein, yeah.
who
This
lived
was
in Oakland.
Yeah. I wrote down page 38 is where that was mentioned, but I don't have a book, so it doesn't do me any
Oh,
good.
yeah. I have a book. Let's see.
Page 38, something about, what did I write down?
There is no there. He said like a
Yeah.
whisper.
Yeah.
In Oakland, yeah. And they're proud of it. The
And
Oakland people are very proud of that quote.
Of her book?
They're proud of the quote.
Everybody's autobiography, it's called. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, does anyone have any special area you'd like to talk about or? There's one quote on, sorry, go on.
The powwow itself, did it meet anybody's needs?
I was disappointed.
Rachel, Did anybody have their aspirations met by the powwow?
Well, let's say if the robbery had not occurred, if it had been able to go off like it was supposed to, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying as it happened.
Or was
Was
it
anybody-
No.
I mean, they all had such enormous.
No, anybody.
They didn't even get fail, they get the money, right?
Yeah, yeah,
They never even got the dancing got started. And so
right.
if this were ever made into a film, I think that'd be a very interesting scene to see these dancers all getting ready to go. And
Yeah, I thought it would be an interesting film, and I tried to look it up to see if there was anything in the planning, and I did not find anything. But you would think at some point, maybe.
I think it'd be a good film, good story too.
Yeah.
In the, if you analyze, I'll say it that way, the actual shooting, the whole shooting started because the people who were going to rob shot each other. The other people who got shot were just
Yes,
on the outside fringe. That's kind of
right.
what is again
Metaphor.
the author trying to tell us. I mean, they can't even get along well enough to rob that they kill each other. I mean, I don't know. That
And
was
also natives killing Native Americans killing Native
Yeah,
Americans.
Right.
well, that's what the whole
Way of-
thing was. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. That was rather unusual too. Yeah. I was, I did write, another thing I wrote, you and me in my notes. See, I'm at the point, if I don't write it down, God. The different names for the different parts, there were 4 parts to the book. So there was Remain, that was part 1. Reclaim, interlude, that was part 2. Part 3 was Return, and then 4 was the powwow. So when you think of those words, Remain, kind of setting the stage, Reclaim, Return. I thought that kind of was interesting, the way he named those 4 parts to help us get through the story. Yeah.
Yeah, and just that beginning sort of essay or whatever history that he writes is so
Yeah.
potent, and that sets the stage for the whole book,
Mhm.
and what happened. I mean, to the context. Without that, it would be completely different, I think.
Yes, it did set the stage, you're right, yes.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, does anyone have anything else to say, or should we wrap this up?
I thank you all. I was wrong. I should have read it. I have to read it. I still think it's difficult and depressing.
Well, it is depressing, there's no doubt.
Well,
about it.
yeah, that's for sure.
Yes.
That's right.
Definitely.
But you can tell when you do a little research about, to find out more about a book, when there are guides, study guides for something, that it's being taken seriously in classrooms. So
Yes.
I think it's that type of book that has some quality to it that can really
Well, this
speak
book
to.
was definitely taken seriously. It was nominated for the Pulitzer. And it won all.
Yeah.
And without it ever becoming a film, what went through my head when you were asking that, Laura, was I doubted it. Too honest.
Too honest.
Well, they don't
And
necessarily.
it's also about a subject that a lot of fault can be found as to why Native Americans are in the plight they're in.
But I think whenever we can learn more about it, obviously we can't live another culture. You can only know what you know, but to read about it, I think really gives you the insight, an honest reading about it, what you think is real. That's the best way to find out how they see themselves. And I mean, I think that's the value of the book to me.
And it'd have to be made by a Native American group.
Yes, to be.
Yeah.
To be pulled off well, but with so many independent
I think
films
so.
and miniseries out there these days.
I could see it.
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah, I could see it like a Netflix miniseries. I
Right.
mean, that
Amazon Prime, yeah.
each episode they're introducing another character, and it's all what, as it goes along, you start to see the threads come together and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could see it.
And he is working on a sequel. Apparently when he first wrote this, he thought he might totally fail. So it's kind of nice that he was successful.
So
Amazing.
would pick up the lives of those who survived the powwow and move them forward, presumably.
Right.
There'll be a lot that are not there anymore.
Right. Well, Edwin Black, he'll still be. He was shot, but he wasn't killed. And same with Orville.
Yep.
So that would be interesting to see if that their lives go on. What
Yep.
do they?
Yeah, it was hard to keep track of who actually survived and who didn't.
I told you, I
Yeah.
had to write it down.
Yeah.
But yes.
Well,
Interesting.
okay, unless someone wants to bring up another subject,
No.
I'll call this to a close and thank you very much for coming.
Our next book is what? What is our next book?
Coming Mrs. Lewis.
Becoming Mrs. Lewis.
Mhm.
Oh,
Um,
yes, yes,
Oh,
C.S.
yes.
Lewis,
yeah.
has anyone read it?
Yes.
Halfway through.
Yeah,
How
I
do you
read it.
like it?
It's good. It's on
Wow.
Google.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
good. It takes place in Oxford, England, and my daughter just went to Oxford, England last December, and I saw all her pictures recently. So I'm visualizing all these places. So yeah, enjoying so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So far.
C.S. Lewis is, you know, the Narnia books, which we
Yeah,
loved
okay.
as kids.
I think you
And-
have to delve deeper in the book to get to the her real story, because I don't know why they did this. They made it like a romance. You know,
Yes, they
it's
did.
a romance novel, and
Oh.
it really should be about woman power, because she was
Because that's the
when
genre.
she was
that's the
yes,
genre
because
of
that
the author. That's the
Yeah.
genre of the author. That's what
what she
Patty
writes. Yeah.
Flatman writes.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
her genre.
yes. But I mean, she was a great historical figure, and shouldn't be relegated just to her relationship with her famous husband. So
But
So
that-
it's kind of like that Marie Benedict book where
Yes, okay.
it was too much of a romance type novel for me of Hedy Lamarr, was it?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Mhm.
yeah,
Right.
yes.
But
agreed.
is it worth reading? Is it worth reading? I hope it's a good.
Yeah. Oh,
well,
yes, because of her
Okay.
story. How would we know her story? We
Yes.
wouldn't know her
I
story.
don't know her
And
story.
why she
Yes.
did what she did. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Okay,
like the
good.
Hedy Lamarr book, you want to know more.
What?
Like the Marie Benedict,
Yes.
the Hedy Lamarr author was,
Oh, yeah.
to know more. But the genre that this woman writes in is
Romance.
Mhm.
But that's what sells. People are attracted to that.
But it also
Yeah.
piques curiosity, I think, as you know, you want to know more. You
Mhm.
want to know more about this woman.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll
Thank you
tackle
Okay.
that
very
one
much
soon.
for proving me wrong about this book.
Okay. Well, thank
It's
you very
great to
much.
see everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
Jane.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bye.
Bye.
thanks, Laura, for
Bye.
getting us
Everybody have a
together.
good Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yep, and we'll
Oh,
see
yeah,
you next
take care.
month.
Have a good Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.